Okay, perfect. All right. Uh, so tonight's topic is something that's very close to me. All this time, before going into clear aligners and in digital dentistry, in essence, I'm so much passionate about diagnosis. On that regard, my goal in diagnostics is to always understand what's going on. Because if you guys have any troubles in your clear aligner journey or in your clear aligner setups, most of the time, the issue is we fail to see some key elements in your diagnosis. Therefore, it affects your treatment plan. So, without further ado, the reason why we want to make a lot of diagnostics very well or very sound is because we want to ensure that this predictable windows that we have on our treatment should be achieved as satisfactorily as much as we can. Now, usually there are a lot of times where, hey, doctor, you told us that distalization is going to be the most predictable movement in clear aligners. How come on my case, how come that my success is not, I mean, I'm not getting the distalization that I need? Doctor, you told us that expansion is one of the easiest way for clear aligners to facilitate space creation. How come my case is contraindicated for it? Or how come that I cannot expand even further? Or how come that I'm having all sorts of difficulties when I'm executing these kinds of movements? Likewise, when you're trying to do your tipping, your rotation, and etc. and etc. Now, during this period, or basically, in all honesty, these things are actually achievable. These movements is something that we can actually produce. But you know what? One thing that I've noticed, not just on my practice, but I guess in your practice as well, is we're trying to make sound with clinical judgments. We're trying to create clinical judgments. However, we did not see the entirety of the picture. Now, if I'm gonna move forward, this is something that I've developed in understanding what do I want to see and what should I use for me to confirm whatever that whatever that I have. Now, there are a lot of things that revolves around diagnostics. And if I'm gonna boil down it into three different dimensions, you have your vertical, transverse, and sagittal. Now, the beauty of your parameters is we can mix and match. We can use all of these things. What I've came up with is because there are some doctors who are struggling. Hey, doctor, I don't have CBCTs in my practice. I'm only limited to only 2D. So what happens here is I've created this one that can somewhat help you identify which parameter is good to confirm a particular dimension or a particular segment. Now, let me just walk it through one by one. And let's look at 2D the parameters right before we go to 3D. And the idea is that you're using the Ackermann-Profit Venn diagram. You have your photos, you already did your assessments, but this is where it actually matters. Now, if I'm going to put your lateral ceph, you're actually diagnosing your sagittal and your vertical deviations. If you're looking at your frontal ceph, you're actually evaluating your transverse and your vertical deviations. Likewise, if you're evaluating your transverse and your sagittal, you're actually looking at your models. Now, as you can see here, transverse and sagittal doesn't have any radiographic tool that we can use. The reason why is because in two-dimensional point of view, there's a lot of superimpositions going on. What we want to see here are mainly relationships of the teeth within each other. And just relying on two-dimensional radiographs, it cannot satisfy all of those things. Now, if I'm going to go back to your lateral ceph, one of the key aspects that I personally use whenever I'm doing my analysis is I always want to start off by looking at the vertical dimension. Meaning, if my vertical dimension is within normal limits, my main goal is to actually maintain. Whereas if I have a higher vertical dimension, one of my goals in the vertical dimension is to actually reduce it. Okay? And if, of course, my vertical dimension is quite low, one of my objectives is to actually increase it to become normalized. In orthodontics, having a low vertical dimension is something much more favorable for me, in a sense that I can welcome all kinds of vertical side effects, because those vertical side effects can actually help me achieve uh, a normal or a normalized or an optimal vertical height. Now, if you're going to look at your models, for example, there are some consults that I've also experienced where uh, dentists want to make the midlines coincide. The problem, however, is there is a confusion whether they want to tackle this issue on a dental management or a functional management. Now, I started off our session where I am so passionate in diagnosing my problem, meaning identifying what's the cause of the issue. Now, most dentists tends to settle on the static point of view. In my opinion, or not in my opinion, in my observation, settling on the static point of view tends to be a little bit more shaky compared to considering a functional perspective. What I mean here basically is, if you're gonna look at things on the static, and by any chance one of your objectives happen to fix the dynamic as well, it can ruin the whole case. Now, one thing that I would love to see here is, whenever you're gonna have those midline shifts, I always want to tell you guys that always look at the bigger picture. What you're seeing here is a sign that this midline is off. But one thing to check with your models, even on your photos, you can use your photos, is you have to check for symmetry first. If canines are symmetric, if midlines are symmetric, you should be on the right spot. Now, in logic, if one side is going to be class 1, once it closes, it should be class 1 on the other side as well. However, for these kinds of cases where everything is symmetrical, and when they bite, midline is off, classification of my sagittal is different from one side and the other, most dentists are going to be so tempted on managing it on a static position. Basically, for example, distalizing the left side, or perhaps extraction on one side and then fixing everything here so that the midline will coincide. However, if you're going to look back on how the symmetry goes, if I'm going to distalize here, literally my canine is going to move a little bit back, making it symmetrical now. If I'm going to do an extraction here, my canine is going to move a little bit back, my midline is going to move a little bit here, therefore giving me a much more asymmetrical relationship in a bigger picture context. Now, whenever you're going to have midline shifts, the first thing that I would love you guys to check is the midline shift functional, or is the midline shift anatomical? Because if it's anatomical, by all means, you're going to see it even on your photos that this is asymmetric from the get-go. Canines are asymmetric from the get-go. That indeed is actually a dental problem. But if you see that it's symmetrical, and once you relate it, and now you can see that there are asymmetries going on, now that's something that you have to relook. Maybe ortho is not the first choice that I should do here. Maybe I should fix my function first, right before I go for my ortho. Now, if you have a lot of, if you can process the information very well, you can do it all at the same time. But in my practice, what I usually do is, if there is a functional problem, I tend to address the functional problems first, and then I go to ortho. My rationale is that I don't want to fix everything all at the same time. I mean, for me, treatment is not a game of speed. It's a game of efficiency. It's a game of making the right decisions at the right time. Okay? The way I treat my patients is, I don't treat it fast, easy, and simple. My way of treating patients is, I want to understand what the problems first, fix the core issues, and then manage the rest. Okay? So, with that out of the way, your frontal ceph, for example, is something that could help you as well confirm further if you have a functional problem or an asymmetry in a much more objective view. Your frontal ceph have a lot of values that you can actually use, but in mere essence or in the bare minimum perspective, literally, this can actually help you have asymmetry checks. If there is a canting on your patient, if the mandible is really shifted on one side, frontal ceph is actually going to help you identify all those stuff. Okay? Now, sometimes those three parameters are not enough. Sometimes, after evaluating those three parameters, we did our best. Sometimes, the conclusion is not enough. We cannot create a very conclusive movement or a very conclusive approach. Now, on that regard, perhaps you might want to look at your CBCTs. Now, the idea of having CBCTs is not because it's new. It's not because it's trendy. No, the reason why I take CBCTs is I make sure that I want to see everything in 3 dimensions. Now, let's look at 3D medical scans. First things first, if you're gonna look at your medical scan, start with a DICOM format file. DICOM is the most universal format of every 3D images that you're gonna look at in a radiographic perspective. And regardless of what software you're using, even if you're using this one, okay, and if you have used a CBCT back then, or even now, if you look at a CBCT, these four things are the most common windows that you're gonna see. Now, most of the time, dentists wants to look at this view whenever they want to look at CBCTs. I would love to introduce you to 3D volume presets. Now, these 3D volume presets are relevant as well. There are filters in your CBCTs that you usually use. Now, for me, whenever I'm using my CBCTs in this application, I usually use the 3D view as a general assessment. Most of the time, I can see the problems right here. If I really want some confirmation, that's the time I'm going to go to my multiplanar reconstructed view. But we're going to get to that later on. Now, transparent bone helps me see the teeth and its angulations in relation to its bone. Okay, I'm not seeing any bone densities here, but merely alignments. Okay, now if you want to, let's say, if you want to prescribe that, let's say for this one, you cannot really create a nice torque. If you try to torque this anterior a little bit more, give it a little bit more root torque, I think it's going to be much more dangerous for you. This actually helps you identify whether you're still working within the bounds of your bone or not. This actually helps me evaluate stuff. Now, shaded bone is practically similar to your transparent bone, but if you're going to look at your bone filter, this is where you're going to see whether you have fenestrations or dehiscences. You're going to see whether a bone is actually thin. It gives you those information as well. Now, I'm not even talking about impaction here, right? Most common applications of CBCT in ortho is mainly impaction. But you know what? For me, in my practice, since I have the luxury of a CBCT that I can easily utilize in my practice, in my clinic, all my patients for orthodontics, automatically I take CBCTs and lateral cephs. Those are the things that I usually take. Now, if you don't have the luxury, you can still imply a LARA principle as low as reasonably achievable. Get the usual parameters, and if there's still a question mark, go get your CBCTs. There's no harm on doing that as well. Okay. All right. So I want to give you this patient. For some, maybe this is something that's familiar, but for me, I really love to walk through with this patient. This is not an aligner case, but this is something where I've actually used CBCTs. Now, this patient is an 11-year-old patient with a missing 2-1. Now, the question that you might ask is, where is 2-1? Is 2-1's gonna come out, or where is it? Can I perform ortho here? Should I restore the whole setup? if you're going to look at what's happening inside the patient's mouth, or before we go there, patient actually came to our clinic with an OPG on hand. They went to 5 different clinics already, and at this point, what you're seeing is this one appears to be erupting on an unfavorable position. But you know what we realized? When the patient had this OPG taken, okay, since this patient's 11 years old, the patient still cannot reach the the machine cannot really go really lower or really down to actually capture the entire thing. But you know what? This patient actually has her OPG taken when she's looking up. Meaning, when she's looking up, all right, when she's looking up, the position of her anterior is a little bit more superiorly. Okay? I realized this when we took the CBCT. Okay? So here's the intraoral photo. We realized it when we took the CBCT. Because for CBCTs, you can actually change the orientation. But please bear in mind that when you're looking at CBCTs in orthodontics, the proper calibration still has to apply, meaning you still have to follow your mid-sagittal plane and Frankfurt plane. Because the soft tissues really has an impact on the way you take your scans. But as you can see here, it's not really pointing forward. It's actually following the path of eruption. And again, the reason is the OPG was taken when the patient was looking up. But CBCT, since it's an isotropic parameter, it's easy for me to see. So having that said, I looked at my preset, my bone volume preset here. And what I found out is there's not enough bone, or there's very thin bone that's covering my 2-1. So orthodontically, it's something that I can fix. Now, my question here is, can I use clear aligners? Can I use fixed, or can I use hybrid? You know what? I've treated this case when I don't have access or very good access to clear aligners. So here's what happened. Before we go to the actual treatment, I also want to examine the 3 different perspectives, right? The 3 different perspectives is what we call your multiplanar reconstructed view. Now, it starts off with your sagittal, where it moves your scan from left to right, and then it moves it goes to your coronal, and then it allows your scan to move from anterior to posterior. And finally, your axial view, which allows you to move your scan from top to bottom. So my point here is this. It allows you to see your object or your subject in 3 dimensions already. Okay? So meaning, if you want to isolate the core cause of your dental problem, getting a CBCT allows you to see it already in 3 dimensions. You don't have to request multiple x-rays anymore. All you need is just 1 shot of a CBCT and everything is going to be okay. Now, the usual setup of an MPR window is like this. Okay? And regardless of what software you're going to use, you're going to see this on every software that you're going to have. This is from Easy3DI from Vatek. This is from Carestream. This is from Newtom or Myray. As you can see, the same problem, the same perspective with the 3D view, and this one is from Blue Sky Plan. So, meaning the multiplanar reconstructed view is one of the universal. It's really a universal view that you guys can use, and by bare minimum, it's something that you guys should maximize on using. Okay. So going back to this patient, we want to understand how are we going to approach this. So in that sense, there is a technique called isolation where I want to see, or I want to identify where the problems are. There's actually a rule in doing your isolations per se, okay? Your isolation like this, it has a general rule where you have to follow the long axis of your target. And all you have to do is just point it there and just search for the target like so. And then all you have to do now is make sure that it follows the long axis. Okay? Now, this is only possible if you're using a diagnostic software. If you're using treatment planning softwares like your Blue Sky Plan, this is something that you cannot do. This is something that we can only use for diagnostic softwares, okay? So this one, what we're seeing here is we still have an open apex, okay? And as you can see here, my central incisor appears to still have an open apex. Now, when I'm managing this patient, I want to understand that whether do I have to approach it as early as possible or do I have to wait until it goes down? Is this tooth gonna come down or not? So by looking at studies, by looking at references, by looking at case reports all over the web and all over the literature sources that we can find, one of the thought processes that was shared back then is remove the etiology, your tooth is gonna erupt. That's one. The second condition, however, is it has to be on Nola's calcification where the eruption or the formation of the root is still on the middle third. Now, how do I know if this is still on the middle third? Very easy. Measure the adjacent 1-1, see how long it is, compare it to the length of your 2-1, and with that, just see whether it's still within the middle third or the apical third. So we did just that. And once we measured it and once we looked at it, the formation of my 2-1 is already on the late middle third, meaning it can still give me an eruption propulsion that I would need. So on that sense now, I can now manage this one with either clear aligners or fixed. But for this one, I can do clear aligners for the rest of the teeth right here as a start, okay? And just for me to mask this tooth here. But towards the end, perhaps what I can do is I can use a retainer, place a button, pull it down. But what I used here, since I don't have an access to clear aligners back then, is what I did is I placed fixed braces, and from there I tried to manipulate, and eventually it went down. Now, doctors, in terms of treatment planning for me, the reason why I selected fixed is not because of access mainly, but because the main mechanics that I need to correct my etiology, to correct my main problem is with a pull. If I'm gonna use clear aligners for this one, it's gonna be so much challenging for me to extrude this 2-1 without causing so much compliance issues. Okay? So again, appliance design, all right? Clear aligners are good. If you need push, go ahead. But if your main mechanics would need pull, you can still use clear aligners, but it's gonna be a little bit challenging. All right, so there's no harm on doing so. You can actually use hybrid. You can use clear aligners as a start, and then towards the end, you can use hybrid, pull it down, and then finish off with clear aligners again. I mean, the possibilities are endless at this point. Okay. Now, this one case is something that really helped me further understand the essence of CBCTs. Now, this patient is already finishing, and patient went overseas. The problem with this one is the patient adjusted herself. I mean, she bought power chains from Shopee, and then she changed power chains herself. Now, of course, if there is unwanted forces or there are forces that are way, way beyond the threshold, what happens is that it's either you get unwanted tissue reaction in a sense that you may have fenestration or dehiscences, or you may have root resorption. Now, for this patient, what we have is, unfortunately, is dehiscences. Now, for us to verify, we don't want to look at everything all in one go. Because for ortho, for me, the most important application of CBCTs in ortho is evaluating your alveolar boundaries. Remember, when I started our lecture, distalization expansion is actually a very nice function of your clear aligners. They're really good with it. However, even if your appliance is good for it, please understand whether it's relevant to your patient or not. And the best way to check is with the use of your alveolar boundaries. Okay, so see if you still have bone, because if you don't have bone, it doesn't make sense. Now, you don't need to use your NPR for this, you only need to use your cross-section views. Your cross-section views allows you to see whether you still have bone. Now, as you can see here, it actually confirms everything that I found here. Now, can I still expand? Of course not. I cannot. I cannot expand even further. I don't have bone anymore. So meaning if I'm going to plan for aligners for this case, my goal is to actually don't move the posteriors. Well, you should not do ortho on this anymore if you're going to ask me. Okay? So in this sense, we don't have enough bone. This is actually contraindicated, not just for clear aligners, but to ortho in general. There needs to be co-management before you even start doing it, before you even start reconsidering the use of your ortho. This is where we refer it to a much more knowledgeable discipline, which is perio, to actually manage this patient. Okay? Now, on the outside, this is something that you cannot see. If you use your two-dimensional radiographs, you cannot see this at all. The only way for you to spot this thing is with the use of your CBCTs. Now, I'm not saying that you should take CBCTs on all of your cases, but in my practice, this is the case that made me take CBCTs, especially for transfer cases, because you never know what happened during that time. Speaking of transfer cases, I have another case here that I would love to show. This patient is actually had ortho 3 times already. And all their dentists apparently discontinued the treatment, terminated the treatment for some reason. Now, as you can see here, we have multitude of problems. But one thing is for sure, this patient is actually this patient is going to have another orthodontic treatment. So obviously, my suspicion is there can be unwanted tissue reaction. So what we did is we got a CBCT for this patient, and then from there, we can actually look at that this patient actually has a disoccluded scan. Now, one thing that you guys want to consider as well is you can actually get a disoccluded scan from your provider or a biting scan. Both of them have advantages and disadvantages, but for me, to be honest, I would prefer to have a biting scan, especially if you want to see how the contact points are related beyond your intraoral scans later on. This is something that's going to be useful. This one is useful as well. Don't get me wrong. It allows you to see your plane of occlusion. It allows you to see your plane of occlusion very, very well. It allows you to see any potential premature contacts that you might experience. Okay. And with that one, I want to look at my OPG as well in relation to my CBCT. And what I see here is actually the other route where tissue reaction is not working the way we should be. Now, because of CBCTs, it allows me to evaluate that, number one, I actually have enough bone for my tooth to expand dentally. And number two, it allowed me to evaluate that I already have shortened roots. Okay? So this shortened roots is something that would influence your biomechanics. Why? Because it allows you to determine where your center of resistance is, how you're going to activate your mechanics. With this appearance, with this radiographic appearance of my incisors, it tells me that if I'm going to apply the same mechanics that I'm going to use for retraction, it's going to be too strong for this too. It could cause a lot of side effects for me. So what it tells me now in terms of imaging, it tells me that I have to modify my mechanics to make my mechanics a little bit lower from the usual so that it can actually match the actual center of resistance of my tooth. Now, speaking of distalization, a study by Ridwani actually tells us that the limit for your distalization is not your anterior border of your ramus, it's actually your lingual cortical bone right here. So for me, if I'm going to do a distalization, especially on the lower, I always want to check whether my tooth or my root is still far away from my lingual cortical bone. Because if it's not, even if even if distalization is still predictable, if you don't have enough bone, if your boundaries tells you that it's not possible, you're only gonna get distal taping. Okay. So those are the things that we can talk about for radiographs. And CBCTs will actually help you identify all those stuff. Now, I also want to give you a bonus talk on understanding your imaging. And this is when using your intraoral scans. Now, intraoral scans, they usually work with tessellations. They work with STL or OBJs. The idea is that the denser the triangles, the better the scan. Now, this is just an image where I decrease the number of triangles of this scan. And as you can see, the amount of details that we have is significantly less compared to this. Now, if you're asking, doctor, if I'm gonna purchase a scanner tomorrow, am I assured that I'm gonna get a nice triangulation of my scanners? Of course, yes, no problem about that. I mean, all your scanners have decent, even if it's the most affordable one in the market, it gives you a decent triangle representation already. Okay, so there are two types of file formats that you have to recognize. You have your STL and your PLY and your OBJ. If you're planning to use clear aligners, STL is enough. We don't need this. But if you want to go for Prosto, this is something that you might want to send to them. That can be another discussion. But here, this is something that I usually show to my students or to people whenever they're buying a scanner. They're always asking me, doctor, what's the best scanner uh, that you can recommend for me? My question is, how will you use your scanner? That's my usual question. I'm not even asking about budget. Now, the thing is, some dentists would pick this one as something that looks better. Some dentists would pick this one as better. Some would pick this one, which is better. But you know what? This one is just a matter of preferences. It's just a matter of preference. In fact, one study actually told us a few months back that scanners can actually get models as with acceptable deviations, all right? Meaning all scanners, whether it's affordable or high end, it can easily produce clear aligners, and it can give you good scans or proper scans that are good enough for your cases as well. Okay, so in your intraoral scanners, you have to understand that whenever you're gonna get intraoral scans, understand that there are scanner tips. Now, scanner tips is something that something that allows you to take the images, all right, and then you have a connection interface. My tip, whenever you're gonna purchase a scanner, is number one, test out the scanner on an actual patient. Don't try it on the model. You can actually, I mean, in the Philippines, what our suppliers here are doing is they literally go to the clinic of the one who's interested on buying a scanner, and then they test it out on actual patient. Because in my opinion, getting a scanner is like driving cars. One can be a Honda guy, one can be a Toyota guy, one can be a Perodua guy, or can be a Proton guy. I mean, uh, all of you can still go to the same destination. The only difference is the riding experience, and that's what you're paying for some scanners. You're paying for the applications, you're paying for the support, you're paying for the versatility of the software. If you're asking me about accuracy, all of them are fairly accurate. So your scanners are actually uh, has a power source. It goes to a sensor, a light, and a camera laser, and then it goes to your mirror, and then it goes to your target. Now, understand that when you're using your scanner, this part here is actually ergonomically positioned so that you can use it to also act as your retractor. Okay? So understand that object scans or intraoral scanners, they are dependent and moderately sensitive to light. So meaning, if you're using your scanners, in my practice, we use scanners on a routine basis. We actually use it as a first patient experience. Okay? So in our practice, when we have scanners, it's a routine for us that for checkups or even for consult, take a scan. Two things. Number one, it gives your patient a different experience. It's good for your marketing. Number two, it gives us records. And there's a third one, it also helps us practice the scanner better. This is where I realized that I personally, okay, when when I'm using my scanners, I personally love the hand feel of Medic. Okay? My associate would love much more on using the an affordable scanner, okay, but my wife can use both. So having that said, I have my own preferences, not because it looks beautiful, no, it's because of the hand feel mainly. So I really recommend when you're buying your scanner, make sure that you really test it out on actual patients. Ask your suppliers, okay? Always ask your suppliers for support. In the Philippines, price doesn't matter for some practitioners. What actually matters is even if there are two practitioners or there are two suppliers who sells the same scanner, they usually go to the supplier that they can trust. So if you're gonna ask me, that also plays into consideration because again, guys, you have to be honest. For dentists who's gonna break the bank on investing on a scanner, you have to do it with someone who you can trust. Okay. So for me, the reason why I selected the scanner is because in our practice, we always would love to evaluate the occlusal interferences, occlusal analysis perhaps. We want to understand what's the reason for the malocclusion, okay? Remember that I've started our discussion tonight we uh, where we talked about functional and static, dynamic and static occlusions. This is the reason why. Okay. Now, caries detection, on the other hand, is something that is actually nice. Okay. Just to give you a little bit of glimpse of what the technology is. Your scanners, your inorganic structures can actually reflect back the light, but your organic structure tends to absorb the light. So, in other words, if you're gonna use your scanners for some assessments, okay, caries can be easily detected. But of course, again, guys, don't trust AI too much. If you have deep pits or fissures, they can recognize it as caries. Okay, so just be careful. Okay. So scanning technique, of course, similar to every impression techniques that you're gonna use, you need to scan on clean tooth and gingival surfaces. You have to make sure that you control moisture. It doesn't cause bubbles, but it can cause interferences on the way you scan because moisture or saliva bubbles tends to reflect back the light. Therefore, again, gives you that bubbles. Turn off your patient's light. Now make sure that you're using your scanning as close as possible. Okay. And there is such a thing called scanning patterns. Now, I would love to show you this one where we scanned the patient here. And there are cases where, let's say, if the patient doesn't have any functional issues, you can take the bite as usual. But for us, okay, for us, if there is a functional issue that we want to resolve, right? What we tend to do is we take the scan of both the upper and the lower. Okay. Okay, and then once we take the scan, I usually extend it that much. Okay, really extend the scan. It's easy to extend. It's easy for your planners to remove data than to add data. So my recommendation is when you're taking the scan, really extend it far beyond the attached gingiva. your planners are gonna love you for it. Okay. So this one, we're scanning the upper. For us, as a protocol, we always take the pallet because we never know. Maybe we might need a palatal appliance and we might need the model. I don't have to take another impression for that. And then here, I'm taking the usual static bite. But when I take the bite, I usually go from molar to canine. So on that sense, if you're taking your bite, basically, uh, but before there, I mean, we go with the scan with a high diagnostic value. You want to make sure that you're covering everything. You really want to extend your scans as much as possible. When third molars are not captured, you are now faced with a decision. It's either you extract the third molar, you cover it with the molar tab, but don't ever leave that uncovered if you're gonna use aligners, because it's gonna cause a lot of interferences, which is gonna give you a lot of headaches. Okay. The reason why we want to extend it is because studies have shown that extending your trim lines gives you better force retention. Now, there are problems though that you might want to experience eventually. Usually the problem with scanners that they move so slow is usually it's either your laptop is under spec or your computer is not plugged in. Make sure that your laptop is plugged in whenever you're gonna take a scan. Okay? Or sometimes your laptop is already full. So make sure it's either you back up your files with an external hard drive. That really helps a lot. Now, this one is one common problem that most, let's say, in Sebaris or even for me, when I'm doing my aligners, this is the common problems that they also get. Double images. The reason why you can have double images on your scan is because you have a dirty mirror, a dirty light source. It's rarely when a scanner is not calibrated at this point. Okay? Uh, Usually it's dirty mirror and dirty light source. So the main solution is literally clean it up. Okay, just clean it up. I use microfiber for that. Now, irrelevant structures captured. Usually it's just scanning technique, to be honest. Okay? Scanning technique. Make sure that, of course, you're scanning quite well. I mean, the more images or the more structures your scanner is scanning, the more time it will take to process. Now, here, gaps and holes in the scan is very common. Guys, do not underestimate the gaps and small holes in your scan. A gap or hole of 0.5 is something that's tolerable. But if you submit a scan that has a gap, most of the time the fit of your aligner is gonna be an issue. So my motivation for you is whenever you're gonna submit your scans, make sure that everything is covered, no gaps. Okay. Metal structures, of course, if there is a metal structure, you have to maximize your expectation or minimize your expectation. Don't expect too much. Metal structures are really difficult to capture with scanners. And lastly, the most important aspect, apart from getting the right or a scan with no holes, most dentists tend to also underestimate the bite registration component. Now, if you're struggling with bite registration when using your intraoral scans, this is my way of actually helping you. First is you go with the wave motion, cover from molar up to your canine for both sides. For both sides, you cover your molar to your canine. Uh, Most of the time, the reason why some cases where you submitted an erroneous bite and then your planner communicates to you again, or let's say Sebaris in particular communicates back to you because you did not submit the right bite, they're coming from a standpoint that if the bite is wrong, right, the final relationship of your occlusion is going to be erroneous as well. That can cause you unwanted refinements. Okay? So, before you even submit, my recommendation is always check your scan. Check your scan, check the bite, even before dismissing the patient. right? And for you to prevent unwanted, unorganized bite settling on your bite registration, make sure that you can follow this workflow. Scan from molar up to your canine. It makes a lot of difference. Okay, so by default, if there's no functional problem, you can actually start by scanning your case like this. You can actually start with this one, scan from your molar up to your canine. And you should be fine, right? And once you finish that one side, you can now try on the other side. Okay. So as you can see here, it goes from your molar right into your canine. And it ensures. Now, what we're doing here is we're also checking the whole thing. Now, for me, when I have a functional problem, now this patient is complaining of functional issues, manifestations such as migraines, muscle pains, joint pains, and everything. So at this point, what I'm actually trying to do here is try to establish where the centric relation is. So once I found out where the centric relation is, okay, I try to look for it, locate it. All right. So all the tricks on your playbook, whenever you're locating your centric relation, okay. From there, I locate. Now, for some dentists, they would use the bite registration gun. Okay, you can use that. And on the other hand, okay, for me, for this application, once I spot where the centric relation is, I can now locate where is it. Now, what I used here is I used wax to actually lock the anterior region because for functional problems, it usually happens on a split second. Okay? It's almost hard. It's very difficult to lock it in place. Okay, because premature contact, the first tooth contact happens on a split second and then it goes straight to your maximum intercuspation or your centric occlusion. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to seal the position where there is a bite, or sorry, the anterior bite. And then I get my scanner. And then I scan. Okay. And then I scan. So what I do usually is I just scan it like so. Okay. There we go. So I'm scanning it now on centric relation or in her first tooth contact or the retruded cuspal position. Same technique, same stroke. I'm capturing the molar up to my canine. And then what happens is I'm gonna capture the left side. So because of my bite registration, it allows me to capture two bites. This is the bite in maximum intercuspation. This is the bite in centric relation. Same thing that happens here. This is the bite in maximum intercuspation. This is the bite in centric relation. So meaning, for us, it's either we can go for splinting, but as you can see here, we have detected that the problem is actually coming from this second molar here that caused her a lot of problems. So what did we do? Okay, let me just shift back to my mouse. Okay, what we did here is we actually created, okay, a simulation where we use the bite in centric relation already. We use the bite in centric relation. We did not use the bite in centric occlusion. Why? Because my goal here is to bring it as close as possible to the centric occlusion. And my goal here is to actually fix this area. Like so. For 15 aligners, that's gonna be my main goal. Okay? So here's what we did. This one is we want to bring it to the proper line of occlusion. Okay? And you know what? This patient's already on her 6th aligner, and there's no more headaches, no more pain, no more, I mean, she's quite okay in the morning. I mean, she's quite nicer in the morning. She can bear with it. She can bear with me for the whole day, because this patient's actually my wife. So she doesn't get mad at me anymore, right? So which is actually good, because we started off the management of this one. So when you're looking at functional cases, always submit the scan in centric relation. Okay? Now, if you cannot do that, try to fix the function first, because it's gonna make your aligner treatment much more predictable. Okay? Like for this one as well. This is not a dental shift. We took the centric relation. This is what it looks like. So now our issue is for us to actually extrude this tooth. That's gonna be our main goal. We're gonna extrude this tooth, this teeth here, so that we can match this centric occlusion, this centric relation bite. Okay? So this one as well, I want to diagnose as well. I mean, we take the bite in CO and then we take a bite in CR. Now it helps us realize that for us to get here better, we have to extrude this one a little bit more. Okay? So again, fixing it. Third molar is going to be the issue. We have to extract the third molars. Simulation jumps in your simulation usually looks like this. Okay? Oops. On Sebaris simulation, simulation jumps usually look like it's the green one here, meaning this one is midline off. And then from there, it's just going to shift back like there. It only happens once your premature contacts are off. But my suggestion, because this one, okay, simulation jumps is not very predictable. It's much more more visual. It has much more visual implication than significant clinical relevance. That's why I always recommend that if you want to have a jump simulation, always take the bite in CR or in your RCP. It's gonna make your life a whole lot easier. Okay, because there's no jump simulation anymore. We're gonna start planning your aligners from the centric relation, which makes it so much sense. Okay, so again, always be careful on those interproximal areas, because inaccurate interproximal areas usually ends up with inaccurate segmentations or inaccurate renditions. You might end up doing so much IPR on things that doesn't exist. Okay? What you want to do is when you have your gaps, when you have those issues, make sure that you have your, make sure they are properly represented so that it can be segmented so better. Okay? So yeah. So those are imaging in clear aligners. I hope it really helped refresh some of the information to you guys, and I hope it actually helped understand or get what's the essence of getting an advanced imaging and getting your intraoral scans, as well as getting it in centric relation for functional cases.